welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show with myself, Neil Geddes-Ward, and Andy Chaplin. Hello, Andy, how are you?
Hello, Neil. Yeah, pretty good. I had some Skype issues earlier, but I found a workaround with the code, so I'm back.
That's ingenious. Now, I've got an old Mac, and I had Skype issues a few months ago, so I had to abandon it. So, if others are listening and they've got perhaps an old Mac and they're getting Skype issues, what's the workaround that you can suggest to them to patch it up?
Well, I've got a very old Mac. It's something like 2006, so it needs replacing anyway. But if there's anyone who's got a Mac and they need to use Skype compatible with 10.6.8, there's a forum that you can go on, and there's a workaround where you can get some code to kind of trick your Skype into thinking that it's a new version when it's not. On the keywords for that, I think was something like Mac OS 10.6.8. Skype not working, then you'll find a load of forums. I don't know the exact link, but if you put those keywords in, you should be able to find the forum I went to and find the workaround there. If not, just buy a new computer, which is what I almost had to do.
Well, that's a simple measure, but yeah, it's the costly one. But yeah, thank goodness for forums now, because I've managed to fix my Mac through forums. So we're not just a paranormal show, we're a techie show by the looks of things. We're getting that way. We all have to become a bit techie with computers and things like that. Now, I know people who are techie here and people that are not so techie, but we're going to be talking about techie because we're going to talk about UFO techie for a little bit. So we've got a couple of things to talk about. We're going to be talking about this year is the 70th anniversary of the Roswell crash, Roswell being the supposed UFO that crashed in the Roswell area of New Mexico, I think it was, in 1947, which was also the same year, coincidentally, I believe, when Kenneth Arnold sighted the first UFOs in modern history, as reported by the press, and where the term flying saucer came from. But also, we've also got the sad news that we've got an author that's left us for other realms, and that is Jim Marrs, American author Jim Marrs. So we'll be talking about him later on in the show as well. But first of all, Andy, would you like to do the honours and introduce our special guest for tonight?
Yeah, certainly. We're quite busy tonight. Just on the Jim Marrs thing, I was absolutely gutted when I read that. I think it was on the InfoWars website. But yeah, I mean, he was fantastic. I loved his sense of humour, a real true Texan, and a bit of a subversive. He had very subversive humour, very much like Jim Marrs. But yeah, tonight we have got Ronald and Philip Kinsella, and we've got the wonderful Ben Emlyn-Jones. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Hello, Philip. Hello, Ronald. And hello. Ben.
Now, this could get confusing for people, because for me personally, Ron and Philip sound quite similar. So you might have to kind of like announce your names, who is talking, so we don't get confused. Well, I won't get.
Well, if you look at Skype, you'll see that Ronald's got one of his wonderful artworks there.
Yeah.
You can see that image. That's definitely Ronald. He's done the CGI dog.
I'm thinking more for the listeners, Neil.
Okay. Okay.
Ron on this Skype chat and can't see that.
Ronald, you'll have to bark a robotic dog bark.
I'll do my best.
But yeah, okay. That might be handy. Ben, he doesn't need an introduction as such, but we all know his voice.
Hey.
Ben is a researcher, and he comes from the Oxford area, and he's joined us earlier in the year when he spoke to us about the spiritualist Helen Duncan, the transfiguration, or what would you call it? The
materialisation medium.
Materialisation medium, that's the word I was looking for. So he spoke to us earlier this year. But Ben, we particularly asked to come on the show because he recently did a UFO conference with which no one else in the UK have been doing. Is that right, Ben?
No one else outside the United States of America actually organised any public event to mark the 70th anniversary of the Roswell incident. So, I mean, I as soon as I knew it was coming up, I mean, I've been sort of anticipating it for a long time. I thought, right, well, if there's a conference going on, I will go to it. And I thought I'll leave a space in my diary for the July of 2017 so I can go to the conference in Britain for the Roswell incident. But no one organised one. So I said, well, if no one else is going to do it, I'll do it. So I actually organised a Roswell 70 conference in Oxford. It was great fun, actually, because I was looking around venues and trying to find out whether there was one that was affordable and a good venue. And the principal one I could find was in a pub called the White House. So I thought it was quite amusing. So we were discussing UFO disclosure in the White House.
Fantastic twist of of events there. Now, Philip and Ronnie, their angle, I would guess, but you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, is more Rendlesham, because Philip and Ronnie, you've both been there in the past, and you've actually managed to summon UFOs, haven't you?
Yes, we. This is Philip. We had an experience back in, I believe it was 1998, where it's detailed in two books. Sky Crash Throughout Time that I co-wrote with Brenda Butler. And she was the investigator of Rendlesham Forest with the first book, Sky Crash, A Cosmic Conspiracy, and in Believe. So that was quite and you yourself, Neil, had done a computerized reconstruction of that yourself, if you remember. So yes, I had a lot to do with that. But UFOs in generally.
Yes, and Ronnie, you was at this, what would I call it? The materialisation? You summoned it, didn't you? You was there and you witnessed it from a distance, and Philip ran under it, but you was with your friend Susan, was that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I observed it through a pair of binoculars. I'm going to be very awful. I'm a bit calmer than Philip. Philip was very excited. I just stood there and observed it through a pair of binoculars. It was, he was racing towards it. I held my distance, my ground. But yeah, I watched it. It was unearthly, most definitely. There's something very interesting that happened during that time, and this is very sinister. We, as you know, we've taken a lot of trips to Rendlesham. We did quite a lot of them late at night. And one particular night we were there, and I don't think we saw anything much that night, but it was a clear night. It was the stars were in the sky, and we were in the middle of the forest. And Susan, Philip, and I, we'd set up camp, a little picnic basket, and we had a little rug or blanket out by a tree. And we decided there's no one around, no one there. You know, when you get to know the area, there's no one there. You couldn't hear anything. We went off for about 20 minutes. And not far, we're just looking around. We went back to our little camp. And on this blanket, we found, to our alarm and dismay, a dead rat and a dead rabbit touching nose to tail on the blanket. They had been arranged there quite nicely, perfectly, in a circle. I've never understood what that meant. I did get the impression it was a warning, but the worst of it was that we knew that we were being watched. And this was absolutely true and sinister. Now, Susan, we had an old camcorder at Rendlesham at that time, and she did record it. I've asked her recently if she's got it, and I don't think she has. She must have the tape somewhere, but she filmed this dead rat and dead rabbit in a circle.
When you say you're being watched, do you think by the secret services, or do you think by negative ETs?
I have no idea, but what I do know is when we saw that, and this is absolutely true, my skin crawled. We both were, and Susan, extremely unnerved. I wanted to get the hell out of there, because that was a message. I've never understood what it was. I interpreted it as a little warning. Basically, I mean, why on earth would someone do that? I mean, it was so unique. From nose to tail in a perfect circle, dead, just lying there. And this is part of the whole. This is a conglomeration of the whole mysteries of this Rendlesham Forest, because every time we go there, something's wrong. It doesn't feel right. There's something wrong with the place. That's my own interpretation. But this really happened, and I think after that I never went back. I was so dismayed by this. It was actually quite appalling. It was quite a nasty warning. I interpreted it as a warning. That was not a friendly sign.
Ooh, right. Was that the same year that Roland Rat disappeared from our screens by any strange coincidence?
I hope not. You remember it, don't you, Philip?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, we had a lot of experiences out there, but the Rendlesham UFO incident of 1980 was the only one that people want to really know about. But what myself and Brenda decided to do was write a book that encompassed a lot of the UFO activity before and afterwards. And one of the things that you do get stuck with is a lot of people saying, what you're talking about is rubbish. But when I came back from Arizona, from the largest UFO conference in the world, I met back up with Nick Pope, former head of the Ministry of Defense for the UFO department. And I was talking to him, and there was one interesting character in there, talked about an alien that Brenda Butler had actually befriended, believe it or not, who had, by the name of David Daniels, who had gone to seek out all of these UFO researchers and military personnel, like, Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens and many other people, Jenny Reynolds, and he frightened the hell out of everyone. And I know that Scotland Yard wanted him, and he'd been seen all over the world, and then just disappeared. And Brenda had a meeting at the House of Lords with Lord Ambrose Norton that was actually, actually documented. And Nick even said to me, yes, that meeting did happen. Because I had a lot of research and a lot of stuff to go through when we were both writing the book. But as I said, with regards to the Roswell crash landing, that was the very first book when I was probably about 12 years old that I picked up from the library and I read. And that captivated my interest from then onwards.
Ben. Thank you, Philip. Ben, what was it that captured you about Roswell? When did you first become aware of it, and what? Because you've written a novel, haven't you, Roswell Rising, as well? So you've obviously got a main focus of Roswell.
I have. Always been fascinated with this particular event, I've had an interest in the UFO issue on probably most of my life. It was pretty mild to begin with. I mean, I remember as a child watching things like Project UFO, which is a kind of a drama series thriller. Yeah. That was very good.
Does anyone remember The Invaders? That scared the absolute heebie-jeebies out of me. It was
I've seen repeats of it.
1960s series.
I've got them all in box set. I've watched all of them. They were creepy, Andy.
If anyone's not seen it, it's a 1960s, very vintage, very old, but it scared the living daylights out of me, that series.
Yeah, that's based on Paranoia, which it was. One man basically fighting the future. It's no different from the X-Files, where I think he got the idea from The Invaders. But certainly a fantastic series.
Yeah,
I think it was there was sort of like a bit of veiled Cold War propaganda there, and I think it was kind of like the I mean, some people have disputed this, but I can't help wondering when I look at it. It symbolises the Russians, because that was the principal dynamic in geopolitics in those days. The fight between the socialist East and the capitalist West, and these Russians, they want to make it their world and things like that. I don't.
The interesting thing is, Ben, is that you're right, because after every episode, they cleaned everything up. They cleared it all out, didn't they? So there was no proof, nothing. They cleared the lot out. It was very good.
Mm. But just going off at a slight tangent, are you you're aware of the obviously the US Roswell, but there's apparently a Russian one as well. Have you delved into that at all?
There are several in Russia. In fact, the incident Roswell, which took place near Roswell, New Mexico, USA, in July of 1947, is probably going to end up being a common noun at some point and entered into the Oxford English Dictionary as that, because you hear things such as Russian Roswell, Irish Roswell, Brazilian Roswell. It's become a generic term for a particular type of UFO event, and that is when an extraterrestrial artifact comes to grief on the Earth's surface and is secretly salvaged by the government. And they invariably seal off the area, they keep people away, they salvage all of the physical evidence is then removed, and very often they come out with some cover story, not always, but very often they come out with a cover story like, a helicopter crashed, or it was a weather balloon, or something like that. There's actually several different other events along with Roswell, including a couple that actually predate Roswell, and that brings us on to Jim Mars, and we could talk a bit more about that maybe when we discuss Jim Mars. But The Roswell incident itself was the definitive one. It was it's by far the most famous, and its impact is phenomenal, and its implications are extraordinary. And having looked at both sides of this, and I've been studying it for many years, ever since I first heard about it, I do not believe the official government story. I think something out of this world actually did crash there. And this is based on...
I'm not saying you don't believe the government, Ben, surely. They would never lie.
Shock horror. Shock horror. They said it was a weather balloon. Yes, then they admitted they lied, and they said, it was a... So they've changed their mind 3 times over exactly what actually did crash in New Mexico 1947. So when the skeptics say, but it's different, this time they're telling the truth, I hesitate. I really do.
So what prompted, you said it's the 70th anniversary. Did they do anything for the 60th anniversary and the 50th?
Yes, I mean, in fact, there's a Roswell festival every year in Roswell, New Mexico. There's a big actually tourist industry in that city, and I don't see anything wrong with that. After all, no one complains about Stratford-on-Avon taking advantage of Shakespeare, do they? You know, it's William
He
Shakespeare.
didn't come to grief on the earth as such, but
He didn't, but I mean, the idea of a place actually exploiting its history for its own prosperity is absolutely fine with me.
I would love a mix of Shakespeare and Roswell.
No, I better get.
Or a medieval alien play.
Oh my goodness, we can certainly get writing there.
To be or not to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Alas, poor E.T., I knew him well.
Bring forth your chariot of fire and light.
You know what? In the 60th anniversary, there actually was an event. There was an event in Sunderland in UK. It was organised by a 16-year-old boy actually called Sam Willey, who's now, I think he's left the UFO field now, but he actually organised this 2-day conference. I never went to it. That was in 2007. So I thought, well, he's going to do another one surely for this year, but he hasn't. So I thought, well, I'll do one. But apart from the Roswell festivals, it's a shame really, because in the 60th was, I think there were several conferences in several parts of the world to mark the 60th. As I said, apart from the Roswell Festival in Roswell, New Mexico, there was only one other public event to mark the 70th, and that was the one I organised in Oxford. But it was very good. Couldn't have been better. It was fantastic.
It was free entry. Is that correct for everyone?
Yes, I decided to make it free entry for several reasons. Firstly, the room was very cheap to hire. A lot of pubs, some pubs even give away function rooms, knowing that they're going to, everyone's going to buy drinks at the bar, but they only charged me a very nominal fee. And I felt a bit guilty actually accepting any money from anyone. Also, if you are organising a conference, this is the first time I've ever organised anything, so it was a completely new field for me.
Ben, 2 questions. What were the speakers you had, if you had any? Presumably you did. And is there any keywords that people can search on YouTube if you made any videos of those speakers?
Oh, it's loads, yeah. First, I say if you charge free entry, it makes it 100 times more simple, the actual administration of the conference. Yeah. The speakers were excellent. We had me to begin with. Then I had 4 speakers booked originally. Myself, Colin Woolford, who studied the alien autopsy film. There was Miles Johnston, famous ufologist who studied all kinds of conspiratorial ufology, and Tony Topping, who is an experiencer. He's a contactee and abductee. And we had actually, at the last minute, someone wrote to me and said, could I speak? And I said, well, I've got a full schedule, but I can book you in for 20, book you in for 20 minutes. You can have like a mini feature. And he said, sure. And he came all the way from Ireland
Dedicated
to speak.
chap.
Yeah, he came to do this 20-minute speech at this conference, John Scarry. But he was actually one of the most interesting speakers of all. I'm very glad I booked him at the last minute, because he had some new documentation that's just emerged, and he was publicising it for the first time. As for where people can actually find the videos, I've recorded all the videos, and they're on my channel, Ben the J.R. Porter, and it's a Pano Hospital Porters Against the New World Order, and you can find the links there. There's 5 videos, so you can see all. It was all recorded. Everything was done that day, so people check that out.
Brilliant, thank you for that. So, Philip, you have an interest in Roswell and Ronnie, I presume, but your sort of sights have been set for the Rendlesham area for quite a few years now. Has Rendlesham been subject in any way to cover-ups in the same way that people kept changing their story about Roswell? 1 minute it's weather balloons, next minute it's crash test dummies. What's kind of how they tried to cover up Rendlesham?
Well, this is Philip. I mean, the thing is, though, that, first of all, we heard stories after the Penniston and Burroughs had actually witnessed the triangular craft in the woods, and that they had, an operations unit fly over from America to silence the witnesses. And of course, then you have the other stories of them saying that, this is all a mix-up. They were just seeing, a satellite that came down. And so once again, whenever you have a really hot piece of a hot piece of something, of a story with regards to UFOs, it's always inevitably covered up. And I think, like Roswell, it gets messy over the period of time. It becomes more almost mythology. But what you have to understand is that we still have many of the key witnesses alive. And I know that there's been certain differences of opinions with most of the witnesses with regards to Rendlesham, and people are entitled to their opinions, of course. But we've seen just recently the whole water's getting quite muddy with regards to that. But I when I researched this with Brenda, in terms of what was going on, there was a lot of strange things happening, and it was almost bordering along the lines of paranoia. And I think that applies to the Roswell case as well. That created intense paranoia. And I think the American military utilized that to their ends, because if it was in Roswell a Mogul weather balloon that they said had come down, I don't think they'd have the whole military going out to retrieve it, because most of the people who had found these experimental devices would take them back to the military and be given some money. So, it's really strange that, with regards to Roswell, that all of this, the whole military involved in just this weather balloon. I mean, that's ridiculous. And also with Rendlesham Forest, this thing was tracked on radar. It compromised the nuclear weapons storage deposit unit, and it had been firing missiles down onto the ground. And this happened over a period of 3 nights. So I do believe that, as with Roswell, the Rendlesham case will end up as well as mythology in many, many years to come.
And Ronnie, on your visits there, you said you saw the rat and things. You felt that someone was watching you. Wasn't there helicopters at some point tracking people?
There was. That's Philip's department, because I didn't always go with Philip and Susan. As I said afterwards, I didn't return to the place. But definitely the rat and the rabbit, that was a sign, because within 20 minutes, a farmer will be hard-pressed, I would imagine, to get a dead rat and a rabbit unless he stored them for some particular reason and put them in a circle. It was a sign. I've never interpreted the sign. So this is wonderful going out, because if anyone could tell me what has happened before, we'd love to hear from them. And also, in relation to Roswell, I think it's very fascinating. I'm more myself personally into Roswell than I am into Rendlesham. Philip's more into Rendlesham, but the Roswell encounter did it for me, because I remembered reading a wonderful comment by someone, some clever clogs, who decided to say that if superior alien spaceships can crash on Earth, or if they don't have sat-navs, I pity them. Well, the interesting point being that I believe radar was newish then. It was advancing quickly, very quickly, and they believe, I don't know if it's true or not, this is only hypothetical, is that perhaps because they were flying within military sites or within radar capacity, it somehow disabled their systems. I mean, even aircraft pilots crash, do they not? Even spaceships crash, so they're going to have their own problems. That's what entranced me to this case. The second being, and as you said rightly yourself, is that when it crashed, the military announced firstly that they had retrieved a flying saucer, and then, oh my God, all of a sudden, bang, oh no. It's okay. They show this photograph of this pathetic tin foil being lifted up by these men laughing for the cameras and saying, oh, don't worry, it wasn't a flying saucer. We mistook it for a weather balloon.
I think, obviously in the intervening years since Roswell, they've obviously got their act together a little bit more, learned from their mistakes of how to deal with things, and now they seem to have a bit of a crack elite team that go around the world and basically hush people up in some sort of whale form. Ben, would that be true, do you think?
Yes, in fact, whenever these Roswells, common noun, occur, it seems that the same thing happens every time, as if there's some form of global policy in place, which all various nation states appear to obey. Now, Philip made a good point, because he was comparing the Rendlesham Forest instance to the Roswell instance, and that's actually That's actually partly true. There was no crash retrieval at Rendlesham, but it did involve this military location. And the good thing about Rendlesham is research began straight away, and which means it's a lot more productive in terms of the evidence. Now, I know that the different witnesses to Rendlesham disagree completely over what happened, and this has caused a lot of fracture. And so some people can become bitter enemies within the witnesses and the research community. But if with Roswell, it's very, very different. Nothing happened for 30 years. We first hear about Roswell when Jesse Marcel, the man who was holding up the tin foil, actually decided to confess in 1977. He came and he approached Stanton Friedman, the ufologist, and it all went from there. But Ronnie actually made a good point as well. New Mexico, USA, in 1947 was the most high-tech place in the world, mostly thanks to the Germans rather than the Americans, because the Germans were all working over there. Some of them under false identities, I should add, that had been escaped with the war crimes trial and been brought over covertly. But you had rocket technology. You had at White Sands, there was rocket technology which led directly to the NASA and the space program. You also had radar. You mentioned radar, Ronnie. Very true. The high-tech radar was being developed there, and nuclear weapons. The 509th Very Heavy Bombardment Group was the only nuclear-armed military unit in the world at that time. Not for long, but at that time it was, and it had been involved in the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki with atomic bombs. Now, this could explain the presence of UFOs. As far as the actual crash, it may well have been something like you said. We don't know how these extraterrestrial craft work, so therefore we don't know. Obviously, I don't think any machine is invulnerable to faults and failures. Another interesting thing was there was a massive thunderstorm a few days before the Roswell incident broke out. Now, thunder and lightning are often associated with crash retrievals, as if thunder is off the effects of thunder and lightning have some kind of effect on UFOs. We don't know why. It could be something to do with their power plants, their propulsion systems. Unless we know more about the technical details and engineering of these artifacts, it's impossible to know exactly why that happens, but it very often does.
Yeah, the other thing as well, too, is with regards to evidence. I mean, this is Philip. When I was doing the research with Brenda, she let me hold this material that I know that they're one of the crafts that split into several segments when Colonel Charles Holt went out into the field with his men. That this craft was dripping metal. And Brenda had gone into the forest to retrieve this substance, which I held, a very strange type of material. And it's been analysed, and Brenda told me that the analysis team couldn't work out what this was. So had I actually touched something that's connected to alien? I don't know. But I will tell you that I do agree with you, Ben. Most definitely there's more evidence to back up the Rendlesham Forest case, even radar tracking, which is very, very important and essential with regards to unknown objects or foreign objects in airspace. With the Roswell case, unfortunately, we only have hearsay. There is nothing really to show us any proof that this kind of thing happened. I mean, even the alien autopsy that was shown, when I saw that, I thought, what a load of rubbish. And that's my opinion, my personal opinion. And again, another ruse to deflect the real attention, because they lift everyone up into believing in something, then they bring you smashing down, so people say, do you know what, forget it, I'm not interested in this anymore. And that's exactly the psychological weapon that these guys at the top of the pyramid of control do.
It's deliberate. I mean, the alien autopsy, I mean, it's Colin Woolford has a different view on this, but I personally do think it was fate, and it was possibly through some mechanism I'm not sure of. It was, or at least if it was not fate for a particular purpose, it was sped and elevated to international fame for a purpose, and the purpose is exactly what you said, Philip.
Could it be that there is a real Roswell alien autopsy film out there that's gone amiss, and so to cover their tracks,
definitely.
They've made another one. Yeah. Okay. I wonder if that's the case.
Definitely. Yes. I absolutely agree.
Yeah. So it's possible that people have seen the genuine one, and obviously, in the same way that someone says I've seen a genuine UFO, someone then produces a bit of tinfoil or a crashed piece of satellite and says, no, this is what you saw. And with the autopsy, we're seeing fake autopsies and things like that, and it creates kind of confusion out there, I guess.
It does. It discredits if you could put out something fake and make it very, very obviously fake, and as you say, Ronnie, then pull the rug out from under everyone who's been looking at it. If real evidence does emerge, then that evidence will not be looked at as seriously. And in fact, soon after the alien autopsy came out in 1995, some other film did emerge, which I think is far more likely to be real. Not from Roswell specifically, but from several other events, including a couple in Russia. There was, you mentioned Russia, the Russian Roswell, that was one of them. And another one emerged in the United States, which I think is it's become known as the Alien Interview film. And everything that's wrong with the autopsy is right with these, but they've received almost no publicity compared to autopsy. Reason is, well, we've seen these before, haven't we? Students make them,
Ben,
Oh,
Ben,
sorry,
can
Ronnie.
that's all right. Sorry. Ben, can I just ask, the pilots of these other vessels, are they described the same or similar to the one at Roswell, the Greys? Are the pilots the Greys? Is that what they are saying?
The one in Russia looks distinctly different. It seems to be very, very small. It has long limbs. Now, the one that came out of the interview video, it actually resembles very, very closely descriptions from South Africa of an event that took place in 1989, a crash retrieval in the Namibian desert, which is in South Africa, and so it's called the Kalahari Desert. Yeah, and there was a talk of a crash retrieval. Tony Dodd reports this in his excellent book.
Yeah, I wrote to him, and he wrote back saying that he was investigating that when he was around. So I do understand about that UFO crash landing there.
And the witness who came forward and actually revealed the actual interview film did say that these things had arrived at Area 51 in around about 1989, which makes it quite likely that these were the South African ones, which is interesting because South Africa is a sovereign state. It doesn't have to hand over artifacts of any kind that crash in its territory and invade its airspace to the USA. We say USA. Is Area 51 a part of the USA, or is it an enclave of some kind of super government? But you would think it's not obliged to hand these things over. But whenever these things happen, it always does. In Brazil, in 1996, there was a crash retrieval involving live extraterrestrials. Again, these things were taken out of the country to the United States, presumably to Area 51.
Do you think because there is a theory that there is an agreement that anything UFO related is under the jurisdiction of the United States? And I just want to bring in something that Simon Park says. Simon is, for the listeners, is probably quite well known to most people as being a contactee, and he visited a radar base within the United Kingdom, and he was told, and he's gone public on this, he was told that the English RAF kind of like have jurisdiction over this particular base, looking out all over the world. They've got these kind of 3 domes, I think, that look all over the world. But as soon as anything extraterrestrial or something a little bit odd that's not kind of earthly planes, etc., comes into the vicinity of their knowledge, the English people all have to get up, go away from their computer screens into another room, and the United States of America representatives come in, sit down, deal with it, and then kind of like the English come back when they've dealt with it. What's your take on that?
I can well believe it, because this is very similar to what a gentleman who talked to Timothy Good in the Brazilian Air Force said. He said that when this event happened in 1996, basically the Americans immediately moved in and took over. There was a rather amateurish crash retrieval by the local Brazilian authorities, but the Americans very quickly moved in and pushed the Brazilians aside. It seems there is some kind of treaty that most, if not all nations of the earth have signed, which does give the United States, for whatever reason, jurisdiction over the UFO secrets and these crash retrievals, which are very, very inconvenient because they leave unmistakable physical evidence. And if you're trying to keep this a secret, you don't want that lying around.
It's interesting, actually, because Richard D. Hall's done a little bit of work, because he didn't know Tony Dodd per se, but he's aware of Tony Dodd's work as a researcher. And I guess Richard D. Hall's sort of carried on that kind of the torch, if you like. But he was talking about back in 2014, he made a film called NATO and the Human Mutilations Cover-Up. And basically, to inform listeners, this film is available on YouTube and richplanet.net as well, which is Richard D. Hall's website. It's quite a disturbing, dark film, as he admits himself. But basically, he had tracked down, with the help of a Welsh UFO researcher, a black ops guy from I think he was stationed in Germany at the time, but he was an English soldier who was recruited basically into a kind of secret part of NATO, and their job was to go out to different parts of the world at a moment's notice, flown there by plane, and then maybe to a more rural area, if it was a rural area they had to go to via helicopter, and secure an area where a UFO was either crashing or literally dropping human dead bodies from their craft, after they basically done what is commonly called human mutilations, a bit like the animal mutilations, which Linda, I forget her name, Linda Madden Howe, is it? Who done the Strange Harvest.
I understand that.
And basically, they seem to be aware that
I got in touch with Richard D.
Yeah. So basically, you're aware of that, Philip, are you? The idea that these human mutilations occurred, and this guy was going out, and they secure the area, and he said they can wait there for up to 5 days, camping, securing the area, until the Americans come in and they take everything away.
Definitely. I mean, I've included that in my new book.
Isn't it interesting
hopefully ready to come out soon.
Carry on, Philip. Yeah.
We're getting a lot of Skype breakups. It's very interesting that on this particular.
NATO's trying to cover us up. Can you communicate, Philip, or are you having trouble there?
No, I can communicate. Yes, there was a very disturbing case with a young boy and a young girl that had been found on the plains of Brecon Beacons, and it was very disturbing. And I won't go into detail here, but you're absolutely right. Richard D. Hall had allowed me to use within my book that part of what he was doing and researching. He's a brilliant guy. He's no nonsense, black and white, like all of you guys, but I am very much aware of that. Very disturbing, and it's basically a cleanup operation. But it's clear to see that the Americans are very much in charge, and that was stated categorically. They have these emergency backup teams, cleanup operations that go in and completely clean up the whole site, cover the area, and no one will ever know what happened at all. So it is a very disturbing case, and with regards to human mutilations, but I believe that most of the ufologists and many other researchers are a little bit, anxious to talk. They don't want to talk about it. It's almost like they get a little bit upset. And I know that Linda Moulton Howe gets extremely upset when anyone mentions about the human mutilation program. And I've got to say there could be possibly a cover-up with regards to that.
Oh, right. Now, it's interesting, actually, because I think you all know that I go to Orkney to visit my children who live there, because I once lived there myself. And on my last visit there back in April, my daughter, who now drives, she was driving me around, and we went onto a particular beach on the mainland Orkney, just looking around. There weren't many people there. It's not like a beach you get on the south coast or something where there's loads of people sunbathing. These beaches are pretty remote. You see a few people walking dogs, and that's about it, really. When my daughter spotted this dead seal, she goes, "Look, Dad, there's a dead seal here." So I went over and had a look, and it looked like a common grey seal. And I noticed that it resembled very much like a mutilation kind of scenario. And I thought, my God, this is just like what Linda Madden Howe's reported, and also Richard D. Hall, and also who else was that? There was forget the guy's name.
David Caton.
David Caton, that's the chap. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, so in fact I videoed this dead seal because it seemed to have its head removed, but it also had its tail removed. I didn't say anything to my kids. I thought this is a little bit not sure about this. So I videoed it from different angles, and I messaged David Caton because he did a talk for my High Book and Paranormal meetup group, and he covered animal mutilations. And he basically confirmed he believed that what I had seen was very similar to an ET mutilation of another seal from somewhere else in the British Isles. He said both injuries matched each other completely, so he was convinced what I'd seen had possibly been killed by an ET craft or something.
Yeah. Well, this is where Richard got into a discussion with Linda Moulton Howe, and she was very, very resistant to this idea that that humans were in any way targeted like this. However, every other species. There's some background noise there from Philip. I think he's eating some crisps.
It's that time of day.
Yeah. But what happened was there was, of course, every other species of animal is targeted in this way by whoever or whatever is doing this. We have cattle, of course, but all other kinds of farm animals can be affected. Wild animals have been found with these injuries, pets, and even a couple of zookeepers have reported animals in their zoos with these kinds of injuries. So why should Homo sapiens be exempt?
Exactly.
Yeah. From the position of an extraterrestrial, why should... I mean, they may make some distinction between different species, but they're not human, so why should they make a distinction between us? And this is, I understand why Linda Moulton Howe feels uncomfortable with this fact. And indeed, Stephen Bassett, I raised this with Stephen Bassett when I was interviewing him for my show, and he was extremely reluctant to go there, basically. But the fact of the matter is, we are dealing with some kind of force which is carrying out these, which is taking these beings, these animals, whether it's human or other kinds of animals, doing these injuries, killing them, doing these kinds of injuries for whatever reason, and abandoning the bodies. So this is a fact that has to be dealt with.
I think this is Ronnie, it's interesting then, absolutely fascinating, because they do seem to be relatively new. If these were conducted by the aliens of the past, they wouldn't need to do this. I've said this before, because they would understand our anatomy. That's why it smells suspect to me that this is a new force or a new kind of extraterrestrial that's not very pleasant. Also, I did mention the fact before that the cattle that are mutilated, well, they're always interested in the reproduction organs, the stomach and the bile and the skull. Could it be possible that something is monitoring what we eat, because cows ingest grass and we eat cattle? It's most of the population are based on dairy products. Is it possible that this new force is interested in how we work, how we function? Certainly, it must be a new kind of force, or relatively new, to do this, because anything other would be experienced enough to understand us, having visited us for so long. What are your thoughts on that, Ben?
Well, this is a good question, and several people have posed this about why they're doing it, or whatever is doing this, why they're doing it. I suppose the thing about it is, if you want to work out what people are eating, then there's all kinds of ways of doing it without leaving bodies with holes cut in them lying around the countryside to let them know that you've done it. And I mean, this is something that skeptics often bring up. They sometimes say that this is a covert government operation. There's a guy called Gabe Valdez he's written a book about this. He says, well, it's actually a covert government operation that's monitoring nuclear residue from a very extreme form of fracking that took place in New Mexico many, many years ago, called Project Gas Buggy. Well, they actually detonated a nuclear bomb underground in the hope of releasing gas to which they could then extract. But the thing about it is, I mean, if you want to test nuclear radiation in farm animals and things like that, well, there's all kinds of ways of doing it without, again, picking the farm animal up by a helicopter in the dead of night and taking it away. I mean, why don't you just go out and buy a cow or a sheep or something? It's much cheaper and much easier.
There's another element to that as well, Ben. Why leave the body? Let's say you're a really nasty, dark, covert government ops. Why not just take the person or the cow, do whatever you want to do, and then just incinerate the body? Why leave it so people like us come along and do radio shows on it?
Exactly. Why don't they? If they want to do, if they want to do this secretly, there's much more efficient ways and covert ways of doing it. I mean, why? It's almost like they don't care or whatever. It's hard to know. This is why I don't think any human institution is involved in this. That's one thing for certain. There's no secret government operation is doing this. I think the government know it's going on and they're terrified. Richard D. Hall, David Caton have actually found this out because they took a mutilated horse body to the Royal Veterinary College, and where autopsy was done, and they could not get the pathology report from this. They tried to get it they had to go to the Freedom of Information Act. They were obstructed every bit of the way. It's very obvious the government, someone had stepped in, maybe the DEFRA, the Department of Environment and Food and Rural Affairs. They stepped in and they'd basically taken over the entire case, and they probably classified it. So the government know what's going on. They're terrified out of their wits. They don't want us to know because they can't stand the thought that they're not in control of the airspace. Someone else is, and they can come and they can do things like this.
Now, wasn't there a UFO researcher? I think his name is Phil Schneider from the.
Phil Schneider, yeah.
Yeah. Now I remember he's now been killed or died or something.
He was killed. Apparently committed suicide in 1996. Where in fact. This was just after he started speaking out about his own work in building deep underground military bases, including a six-story base underneath the Denver airport. Then he actually said that my life is in danger for giving this. If anything happens to me, I didn't commit suicide. Okay. Anyway, he died. He was killed in 1996. Apparently, strangled himself, hung himself, in a way that was impossible to do by yourself. It looked like suicide. It was talked to have a suicide. The coroner's inquest said suicide, but it was murder. It was pretty clearly murder.
Now, I got confused with him and another guy called William. I forget his other name, but it was
Hamilton. Was it William? William Hamilton.
Don't know if it is.
No. Oh no, that's another author.
Had a shootout with the sheriff's department because there was one. Who
there was that. It might have been that guy, but he was talking about basically a couple of crashes, and I think there's some UFO crashes they will never ever talk about, and it might have been Aztec in New Mexico, something like that. And the reason he said they don't want to go there is because they found human body parts on these crashed UFOs. Stunned silence.
So that fits in completely with with Tony Dodd's work and Richard D. Hall's. This guy for this special forces guy who was involved in this, because he talked about the presence of human bodies at these sites that he visited, where he had to be deployed to.
And I've heard stories as well on either I've read it or seen it on YouTube. I can't remember where I saw it now, but allegedly in the Vietnam War, there were soldiers coming up the river, whichever river it was, in their little boat, kind of Apocalypse Now style, I guess. And they came across ETs in a craft or something that were picking up human body parts there or something. They had a bit of a shootout with them there, apparently, but they were picking up human body parts left over from, a war zone or something.
Well, this goes on all over the world. I mean, every single part of the world has been affected by this phenomenon, and in fact, it goes back a long way. The earliest British report, I think, is from 1954. However, there's also there was a TV show, a documentary about Nepal or Tibet or somewhere like that, and they found a yak, one of these large cow-like creatures, with the same injuries high up in the Himalayas.
And also, I believe again, Dave Caton mentioned it. There's this Russian case going back to the 1950s. These people that was kind of, I think they were young, kind of holidaymakers or something, and camping out in the snow. Why anyone would want to camp out in the snow, I don't know. But there we go. You do crazy things.
We have Max Spires as well too, who was mysteriously killed, wasn't he? Another UFO researcher from England. That was I think that he wanted his mum to investigate some of the stuff that he was researching, and the next thing that happened was that he was found dead. So going back to the story of those human body parts found on crafts, this is not the first time that this has come up. I know that Phil Schneider said the same thing. He was doing a lot of upselling a lot of people, and I believe he was the one that wasn't there an all-out war at one of these bases with the very tall greys with the big noses, and he'd got burnt, hadn't he? His hand had been compromised, and he'd got these terrible burns and cancer. Yeah. So and he knew his stuff. When you watch those, I've watched them on YouTube. I've got his book. When you watch them. A book all about him. Sorry. When you see him on there, this guy knows his stuff. He knows what he's talking about, and I absolutely believe that he was saying too much, and he didn't want people to know exactly what was going on. So, I think the flavour of of killing people is still present today as it had been back in the 40s and 50s.
Do we know? Sorry, Andy.
Apparently, there's a whole host of holistic healers who have been bumped off as well. People in the alternative healing sector, people who claim they found cures for cancer, having mysterious deaths. Have you heard of that one?
Oh, yes, absolutely, totally. I mean, there's also an author who wrote Medical Mafia, and the medical establishment tried to sue her because she was trying to show people how to cure cancer. And this goes into a very multifaceted, very complex arena that none of us will just be led down dark corridor after dark corridor. But absolutely, Andy, totally. These things can keep coming up, and as we know, with these organisations, with these companies, there's people that preside over the smaller people, if I may say that very respectfully, who are not in the know. And if anyone speaks out about any form of alternative medicine or a cure for an ongoing illness, then of course money is then the big question here, question mark. It's all about money, and as we know, but if it was known, let's just go back very quickly here. All petrol and diesel cars in the year 2000, and is it 40s? When is it? 2000? So we've got to get rid of them all. It's got to be electric cars.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, and now all of a sudden there must be a problem because the fuels in the planet being depleted, and now they're going to turn everything over to electric cars. So, the thing is, though, I bet you if there was another problem, they'd just bring forward anti-gravity as a way of, trying to amend things quickly.
Yeah, and just quickly on the alternative healing thing, I'm going to give a quick plug to a friend of mine. I won't mention her name, but she had stage 4 cancer, and she was in Thailand, and they worked out that it was actually from a skin lymphoma that travelled to her brain, and she had a 4-centimetre tumour removed from her brain, and they said it came from a skin cancer. And she actually came home, and she was told that she's got basically a month to live. She was given end-of-life care, and she actually managed to cure herself with a number of things, with a positive mindset. I have not got cancer, affirmations, cannabis oil, which is really crucial, and completely revamping her diet, getting rid of all of the crap, all of the junk food, and going with wholesome organic food, nutrients, and supplements. And she actually completely got rid of the cancer. She's been given the all clear, having got stage 4, which is the last stage before death. And the doctors were absolutely flummoxed. They didn't know what was going on. They said to her, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it because it's working. And anyone who's interested in kind of finding out about this or in terms of how they could help themselves or their family members if there is a cancer condition, go to Carmony Coaching, spelt with a K, Carmony Coaching, and you'll just send a message, and I'm pretty sure she could help a lot of people. Carmony Coaching is basically kind of like a holistic, get yourself better, get yourself into a kind of positive frame of mind. And I'm hoping that people here will kind of shun the regular kind of chemo and radio, which to me is a death sentence. I mean, what's the survival rate? Something like 3%. Something ridiculous, like 3% from chemo and radio.
I think it's safer just to climb inside the microwave oven.
It's insane. It's medieval butchery done in a technological way. And have you noticed with all these cancer charities, it's kind of like the cure somewhere over the rainbow. And actually, at one of your conferences, Neil, I won't say his name because he's a GP, still in serving GP. He winked at me and he said, "Do you know what, Andy? There's a lot of money in cancer research."
Oh, I think the whole health service knows that. That's why we want to make it private, I guess, maybe, because so we can keep paying for it. But yeah. I mean, it's possible that these mutilations and things like that are linked to, maybe in some weird way. Although we're seeing these animal and human mutilations as quite disturbing, at the other end of the scale, when we're in laboratories ourselves as humans doing research, we're researching on lab rats for cures for people. Now, you could argue, if you want to come from the other end of the angle on it, that perhaps they're doing it for our benefit in the long run. We just don't know, that they're trying to find certain cures, and they have to do certain things that appear to us to be horrific, but maybe for their benefit and ours, it provides a cure in the long run. Who knows? But I must admit, it is still a disturbing aspect. But then again, there's lots of things that humans do are pretty disturbing. And
I think the most disturbing thing with me is are the bodies being left in that state as a warning, or do they just not care? This is the weirdest thing. Like Ben said, is it a warning, or do they just not care?
I don't think they ever watched an episode of The Wombles, so they're not likely to tidy up.
I can answer that actually, because when I was one of the things I did when I was a hospital porter, I actually served at a teaching hospital which also did medical research. They used to deliver boxes which contained sheep carcasses, and we had to deliver them to the various laboratories in the hospital. Now, again, this is obviously to conduct some sort of medical research. We didn't know what it was. We're porters. We just deliver the things, the goods. But if you want to get hold of farm animals, you see, to do medical research for any reason, it's much easier and far cheaper to simply go down a farmer's market and buy one. And there's even they even breed them. Especially there's special farms that breed animals for this particular purpose. You don't have to get a black helicopter and fly to the middle of a field in the middle of Wales and pick up some some being, fly it to where you want to do the thing, then fly it back and leave it in the middle of the field for everyone to find it. So it doesn't really fit with the evidence, Neil, that something like this is going on. Unless it must have some other purpose. I mean, if it is
similar to what Ronnie had, with the dead rat in the woods at Rendlesham.
Yeah,
it's
could
like
be
a
that.
warning. He had it. Presumably, it was from humans. Ronnie,
Yeah,
but,
I find it, as Ben and Andy have said as well. I think well, the aliens can get it cheap, can't they? Just beam them up. And you're right. Helicopters wouldn't even bother. What's the point? And leaving the evidence, the trace evidence for people to discover. They are very professional. They cover everything up. They're very good at doing that. So we are looking at, and it's logical, we are looking at either an extraterrestrial force or some force that we have no knowledge of. And as I said, the disturbing element is anyone would say, well, if they're come to take over the world, they would have wiped us out by now. Well, that's true. They could easily do it. They could introduce a germ and kill us all off in an instant. They're not. The disturbing thing is, this proves categorically, the cattle mutilation and human, that we are being monitored. They're watching what we're eating, what we're ingesting. Are they planning to put something in the grass? Are they planning to contaminate something that we ingest? And not to kill us off, but more disturbingly, for something else. What have they got planned? Now, this, as I was leading to this point, is that they can't be very nice. Whoever doing this, either they're stripped of morals, of course they would be, what the morals we have, they wouldn't probably understand. But more to the point, it's very sinister. What they're doing is we would consider to be evil. Satanic.
So, okay, it's the way we view these things. I mean, there was theories being bounded about this whole thing that maybe in the same way that you can incubate a kind of a virus or some sort of cell growth in live creatures, that people have suggested that maybe ETs or aliens are doing something similar, and this is why they're abducting us and putting things in us to grow, being monitored. And maybe some of them, we don't quite make the mark, and this is why they kill us or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like I read about, I personally believe they're here. I believe they are a force we have no understanding of, and they are in control. And as Ben and Andy said, the military are frightened to death of them because they have no control over them. This hybrid program as well that goes on about people. My argument, and I put this on my Facebook link, my argument, just to sidestep to talk about human hybrids. Why on earth would an advanced species of alien genetically modify a lower race? It doesn't make any sense. That's another argument for another time. But like this cattle mutilation and the human mutilation, why on earth are they doing it? Now, this is, and to my mind, I think it's extremely sinister. There's something not right. There's a plan or an agenda forming which will not benefit us at all. Certainly not from their hand, by their hand.
Yes. And the other question I want to ask, just before we go to the break, we've got about 30 seconds. Do we know which particular race of ETs are doing these mutilations, either on the cattle or on the humans? Any ideas, anybody?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, some people report seeing UFOs in the area when these things take place. I've never heard a report of any witnesses seeing particular beings involved in this kind of activity.
The only one... Sorry, Philip, go ahead.
There was the report on the Brecon Beacons where there was a being that was seen, and it was supposed to be very fast and very threatening with very large claws, almost looked like the devil. As was explained.
This is the one I was thinking of.
That's right.
It sounded like a reptilian by the kind of description.
Definitely,
yeah. And the description was you wouldn't want to mess with it; it could rip you apart.
That's exactly the words used.
Yeah. Okay, I think what we'll have to do now, we're going to be taking a break now because we've got to play some commercials. We'll be back now in part 2. We're talking to Ben Emlyn-Jones, Philip Kinsella and Ronnie Kinsella, and this is Neil Geddes-Ward and Andy Chaplin, and you're listening to the Paranormal Peep Show, and we're talking UFOs.
We'll see you in a bit.
The work of medium Philip Kinsella.
The reading that I had by Philip this evening was spot on.
I feel it's important for those people who are waiting for their message from their loved ones to show how they pass over and what
part they played in that person's life. The spirit will then probably talk about the person that they're coming through, about their life, and about what they're worried about, what their concerns are. Normally a spirit will remember how they passed over, but sometimes it's not always the case. Sometimes a spirit will pass over very tragically, very violently, and they're left in confusion. So all I will get is a jumble of confused memories. What was she spying on someone next door?
Always looking out the window.
Oh my goodness, I don't get the problem of spirits sending in me into 3 people at one time. I may have what I call a queue jump that will come in, but I will notice that as I'm reading for a particular person in the audience, there's someone else knocking on the door basically wanting to come in. So once I've finished my reading, I will then go to that person, and sometimes it's difficult because when you get a queue jump or someone from the other side that seems to jump the queue, you've got to find your link with that person. Normally I go directly to an individual and read for them. Other times someone will come on and through to your consciousness and throw you slightly.
Yeah, he was spot on with everything he said. There wasn't one thing he didn't say that wasn't true.
To find out more about the psychic work of Philip Kinsella, visit philip-kinsella.co.uk. That's philip-kinsella.co.uk.
Welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show. My name's Andy Chaplin with Neil Geddes-Ward. Now, listeners, we do have a slight apology to make. Unfortunately, Mr. Philip Kinsella was munching some crisps throughout the first part. Now, they weren't human body parts. They weren't the aliens crunching away on people's femurs and things. So, Philip, if you would just like to say a very sincere sorry.
I do apologise. I did have it on mute, but it didn't mute. So, you know, I was caught out by that unmuting.
You can blame the aliens if you want.
I'll blame the grey aliens. They've got it in for me.
I would say they get a bad rap, but in this case, they're just going to be left with the empty wrapper.
Oh, God.
Anyway, we have to move swiftly on from that. Okay, so where were we? We were talking about human mutilations, we were talking about animal mutilations and things like that. We've been talking about Rendlesham, we've been talking about the Roswell, because it's the 50th anniversary of Roswell, and Ben Emily Jones recently organised a conference. Now, Ben, you said one of your last-minute guests came in at the last minute, and he flew in from Ireland, and he had one of the most interesting talks. And why was that?
Yeah, well, he only spoke for 20 minutes, but he had some documents which appeared to be some kind of UFO-based documents. I don't know what their authenticity was, but they were completely new and ones that he'd come across, and he was publicising it for the first time.
And how did he come by these documents? Because, I mean, everyone's been researching it for years, and suddenly for someone to find something, especially a guy in Ireland, not actually in America, how did he come across them?
I'm not sure how much I should say, actually. It's sort of like a bit of a work in progress. But I know that several people are looking into it right now. But they look quite authentic, and it's always difficult because we've been talking, the lack of physical evidence, the lack of documentary evidence has always plagued this field. When evidence comes to light, it's very often very questionable. There's a lot of controversy over it. So, I mean, I'm not sure exactly, but it's something still worth looking into. And I hope to maybe provide more answers for you at a later date.
So, okay, that's cool. So, do you think you might be doing a follow-up conference at some point?
Well, now I've managed to do it. I mean, this is people often say there's those who organise and those who can speak. And very often, very, very rarely do the twain meet. And there are lots of people who work behind the scenes at various UFO conferences whose names are virtually unknown because they never appear in front of cameras, they never appear on stage, yet they can organise, they can sort things out, they can work like Trojans to get the nuts and bolts of various events going. At the same time, there are those who can appear on stage and can completely transfix an audience with the eloquence and passion of their particular style. But very often these people have the same kind of organisational abilities as the average cat. I always thought I was one of the latter, but maybe I'm a bit of an all-rounder, one of the few all-rounders in the field. But either way, I shall let you know if another opportunity comes along to produce another conference, I will. And who knows, maybe I could do something a bit more ambitious, like a 2-day one.
I'm sure that people like Philip and Ronnie could come along and lend their skills in some way.
They'd be very welcome.
Philip could have a trained quiz he could hand out to people.
They'd be very welcome.
We'll put Philip in charge of the tuck shop.
I'm not going to live that down, am I? No.
We're going to be known as the Walker's Medium or any other brand of crisp.
At least I'm not a walk-in.
The walk-in Walker's Medium.
Well, we spoke about people being on stage, and very recently, I myself was on stage at the Glastonbury Symposium in Glastonbury in Somerset in England, and also Philip was as well. Now, Philip, you spoke on the second day. Would you like to tell listeners what you were speaking about?
Yeah, well, I went up there and I spoke about, the the hypothesis that I came up with regards to the Greys and what they are, where they come from, why they're here, or a certain faction of them anyway. It'll be too long-winded to explain all over the radio, but they had Ronald had his amazing artwork up there, which was really incredible. You saw that, Neil, didn't you, with the reptilians and the Greys? And I
must say that from where I was sitting in the audience, because this time on the second day I sat in the audience, I could hear kind of gasps of amazement when Ronnie's artwork was projected on the screen. So I don't know if you heard that, Ronnie, but I could definitely hear people go wow and things like that.
Yeah, because he did a depiction of the Roswell as well too, which was like a little poetic licensing. But I really enjoyed the talk, and I loved the atmosphere, and the people were amazing. Everyone was amazing, and we had a great time, didn't we, Neil? We all of us had a great time.
We had a lovely time. We had a little follow up down at the bed and breakfast where Monica, my partner, and I stayed. It was a little treat for her because she'd been wanting to stay in this particular bed and breakfast in Glastonbury. I'll give them a plug. It's called the Covenstead. It's a very witchy bed and breakfast.
It was amazing. It was incredible. It's like stepping into Harry Potter.
Yeah, it's a very Hogwarts-looking kind of decorated bed and breakfast in Glastonbury. And we got permission from the owners before we went there to actually make a short film of Ronnie and Philip talking about all their published works, their books, Philip's research, Ronnie's research, the joint books they've done together, children's books. Monica interviewed them. So that'll be out soon. I'm editing that as we speak. So I think by the time this goes on air and listeners are listening to this video will be on YouTube or on Philip's website or Ronnie's website or both.
Yeah, I mean, it's just wonderful atmosphere, and I'm so grateful to you and to Andy and everyone else that organised it. I mean, they had some really, I understand they had some really amazing speakers. Our day was really rushed because we had to travel there and back again, but we made the most of it. I've never known a day to go so quick. The only thing I really was worried about was getting home because the weather was absolutely atrocious driving back to Bedford. So
it was the worst weather, I must admit.
Gandalf was there as well. Gandalf, when we got there was a tall chap with a robe and a stick, Gandalf with his wife having a coffee. I thought it's like going into the Hobbit.
You see everything in Glastonbury, I'll tell you, everything.
Wonderful.
Where is your homework, Mr. Potter? Come to my office with the ginger one.
Do you know that is spooky? Was that Andy?
Yes, he's always got these voices.
Spooky.
Me and Neil tend to have a little bit of a voice off sometimes.
Yeah, well, Ronnie and Philip have got those talents as well. I know.
Oh, have you? Let's hear some. Need to hear some.
Well, well, my dear, of course. I mean, I'm not the kind of doctor. Oh no!
The old Glastonbury Symposium is one of these dozen things to do before you die kind of situations. You have to go at least once. It's absolutely. I went in 2010. I stayed for the whole week, and it was wonderful. I just loved it. It was like, I went on the Thursday and went back on the Monday, so that's almost a week. I went on the Crop Circle tour as well.
Yeah, I think it's important because it brings awareness to a lot of people around the world. And what's so wonderful is that all the people there are on our level, and you can see now this whole change of opinions with regards to people want answers. And I think those answers are with researchers and opening other people's minds to say, look, this isn't just a nuts and bolts physical universe. There's more to us as flesh and blood entities, and that we are trying to deal with these different anomalies that the governments will not, or going above the governments, because it's not really the governments are just puppets, but going beyond that, because all these institutions, whether or not it's the military industrial units or whatever, they remain tight-lipped. They're saying nothing. It's just all of the researchers and the open-minded people that are trying to dig for these answers. And I think that is a wonderful thing in bringing any function, however small, however large, together to open people's minds.
Now, this, of course, is a good segue into Jim Mars, because one of Jim Mars's books and contentions was about the Fourth Reich, and the fact that he believed, and I actually do kind of go with this, believed that really the whole Nazi ideal didn't really end in 1945. It just kind of transferred continents, as was mentioned before with Operation Paperclip, with all the Nazis going over to the US and some into Russia to work as scientists for their various projects, like the NASA space project, and pharmaceutical companies. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Nazis involved with pharmaceutical companies.
But that's that point, Andy. This is Ronnie. That point you made. Yes, we discussed this earlier, didn't we? Privately, it's actually a technological Hitler regime, because all these kids with mobile phones. I mean, they're wonderful. They have all these wonderful apps and everything. But what it's doing is it's stagnating their imagination, and also it's stopping them from questioning. It's rather like becoming complacent to a system which wants them to be complacent.
Go on, Ben.
Yeah, I was going to say that the thing about the pharmaceutical companies, it's interesting how a lot of them have German-sounding names. Roche, Pfizer. You can just imagine it, can't you?
IG Farben!
Yeah, it's like... do you know that you mentioned Operation Paperclip, Andy? Now, this is... it's the actual public face of Operation Paperclip was just the tip of the iceberg. That we know there's some famous names like Hermann Oberth, Werner von Braun. These are the people. This is where you get the phrase rocket scientist from. These guys were brought over with Operation Paperclip. Von Braun had worked for the Nazis developing the V2 rocket, which of course devastated Britain, especially the city of London, in the war. This was basically the prototype for the ones used in NASA's space program. But the Nazis actually had a parallel, very, very high-tech research. I mean, the Nazis were way ahead of the world technologically than any other nation, and they had the first cruise missiles, the V1. They were
as well.
Exactly, jet engines. They were way ahead in terms of their engineering. Germans are still great engineers, but the true extent to which they were developing stuff was developing new technology, went way beyond what we expect. For example, they were fiddling with anti-gravity and stuff like that. They were experimenting in various ways with anti-gravity and free energy technology, zero-point energy, anti-gravity, propulsion systems, and things like that. Now, some of the Nazis at the end of the war disappeared. There's a guy called SS General Hans Kammler, vanished. He was in charge of a project in occupied Poland, which was known as Die Bienenstock, or it's sometimes called Die Glocke. Now, these words in German mean beehive and bell. And this was the nickname for a particular device which looked like a bell and it hummed like a beehive. But it's said to be based on, some people say it was inspired by the ancient Hindu text, the Vedas, that describe something called the Vimanas, which are basically man-made flying saucers. But they were experimenting with this, and at the end of the war, these guys all disappeared. Yet there were a couple of people turned up, in America in particular, that with false names, that were no doubt some of these guys. There was other people like who lived under false names, and some of them were involved in mind control as well, and genetic engineering, like the infamous Mengele, Joseph Mengele, who carried out human experimentation in the concentration camps, where he had any number of human victims that he could use, where you wouldn't be able to do this normally, but he had as many humans as he wanted to do what he wanted with, whatever he liked with. He turned up in America under a fake name. The Soviets got some of them, Britain got a few, but basically most of them went to the US, and some of them they were never exposed. They lived the rest of their lives under their fake identities in the US.
Is there any credence to the rumours, because this was brought up actually at the Glastonbury Symposium. It was a question, I think, addressed to Philip after his great talk. Someone in the audience asked about, what was it, Antarctica, Philip, wasn't it?
Yes. They wanted to know what was going on in Antarctica, and I've been asked that question many times. I know only as much as anyone else and what's available on the internet. I have no information other, but something tells me, I mean, I do know, and I think a lot of us are aware that they've had some, very powerful people and some religious people going to bless the land, and that it's supposed to be under the jurisdiction of some military force, perhaps the Americans, I don't know. But it's interesting how we get a lot of this information coming through with regards to our Earth satellites that, are cut off at certain points of the Earth when they're going around the planet. But I do believe there's something very important going on there. I mean, is it an alien base? Have they found an ancient system down there? Was it also something linked with the Nazis? I mean, there's a lot of speculation. Ben would probably agree on that one. We just don't know. But I will tell you that I think that there is something of monumental importance, which once again, it's covered up and we only have hearsay. And again, it's just like the classic Roswell case. No one's going to know. And even any whistleblowers comes forward to, spill the beans, they'll be put away in a mental institute or they'll grease the brakes, something like that.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Philip, because in 1946, so it's not long after VE Day, just over a year after VE Day, Operation High Jump took place, which was commanded by Admiral Richard Byrd and Admiral Forrestal, James Forrestal. Now, this was a scientific exploration of Antarctica. It was to set up a scientific base, prospect for minerals and things like that. Well, it's possible to do these things without a 32-ship naval task force, you would think. Yet, this is what Operation High Jump consisted of. It consisted of 3 separate fleets. Forrestal commanded one, Byrd commanded the entire operation. There was another one, there was Admiral Richard Cruzen. He commanded the 3rd fleet. And they headed for Antarctica, supposedly to set up these bases. Now, there's a film you get on YouTube called The Secret Land, which is supposedly a documentary made about their expedition. However, I think it's a load of lies. I think it was just a cover story. They were after the Nazis in New Swabia, which is a region of Antarctica which was occupied by the Nazis in the 1935 German Antarctic expedition, where Germany actually sent some scientists to set up all kinds of infrastructures down there. And it's rumored that Hitler was down there for a while. But the Nazis, Hitler eventually ended up in South America because he didn't die in Berlin. There's no evidence to suggest he committed suicide in Berlin. The only evidence was captured by the Soviets. It was captured by the Red Army. The dental records of the body before it was burnt were taken away. After the Berlin Wall came down and the Soviet Union collapsed, these dental records were declassified, and it was not Hitler's. We know that because the body's teeth were totally different to the ones from Hitler's dentist.
And the photograph of the body, that apparently the last photo ever taken of Hitler, looks nothing like him at all. And there are also recently declassified FBI documents that apparently are legit, stating the FBI had a very big interest in trying to locate Hitler because they were absolutely convinced he went to Argentina.
It is totally and utterly amazing because we had the famous newsreel of the bunker when the Red Army actually captured the bunker. They captured the Nazis who were still alive. The body, you see a picture of the body, you're right, Andy, it doesn't look like Hitler. And you'd think that someone of that importance in terms of the war, that he was the number one bad guy, they wouldn't just dispose of the body and say, it's okay, he's dead. You see the same thing with bin Laden all these years later. When bin Laden was supposedly captured and killed.
Yeah, we never saw the body, and they said he was buried at sea in accordance with Islamic tradition, which is rubbish. There's nothing in the Quran that talks about burying at sea, and they say that the body was so mutilated that it was unfit for television. Well, they had no problem showing Saddam Hussein getting hung or Colonel Gaddafi getting beaten up. So
yeah.
What's up with that?
It's crazy. I remember because I was on night shift at the hospital when this happened, and when I got home, I immediately turned on the news, and there was a guy from the U.S. Embassy being interviewed saying, "This is amazing," and they asked the reporter says, "What's going to happen to bin Laden's body now? What his earthly remains? What's going to happen?" And they said, "Well, his body will be taken back to the United States for certain, and it will be put under observation. It will be examined, and selected members of the press will be allowed to examine the body. There'll be at least a week." Before the body would then be returned to the family for burial. But for at least a week, the body would be kept in the United States. It would be examined. It would be put on public display. This is really amazing. And then what we found out, they took the body back to an aircraft carrier, and then they found a Muslim member of the crew, and they just said, "Could you do a quick funeral on this guy? We're going to throw him in the sea." And then that guy from the U.S. Embassy, who I saw interviewed, was never back on the news again. And you can't get this interview anywhere online.
Ah, that's interesting.
And it's a direct parallel with what happened to Hitler. Direct parallel.
Maybe he's gone down to Antarctica as well then.
Or maybe he's maybe hanging out with Lord Lucan. I don't know.
Oh,
They
yeah.
will disappear.
Now, one of the things that I mentioned to Philip about Antarctica, because we sort of ended up talking about, obviously, UFOs again, and I said to Ronnie and Philip, I said, now, obviously, we've got the radiation belts that circle the Earth, and they go out in a kind of big donut shape, as Ronnie correctly said, around the kind of circumference of the Earth, but they don't actually go over the North and South poles. And I kind of wondered that maybe, if there's alien bases at either the North or the South Pole, that perhaps alien ships, ETs, whatever, are using the advantage of having no radiation belts or zones over the North and South Pole to access Earth without having to pass through severe radiation. Any thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Well, I mean, I think, to be honest with you, I thought about what you said, and it does make actual sense, to be honest with you. So if these military officials have, taken over Antarctica, or a very large part of it, for their experimentation, is it possible that they've actually discovered some type of UFO base or underground UFO facility? The thing is, though, we've always been...
Sorry, Philip, or even a fossilized ship. Perhaps they've discovered something that's been there for a long time, and we know where that comes from, don't we?
Yeah, I know.
Carpenter.
Yeah, the thing. I remember that I saw the prequel to that, and that really gave me the heebie-jeebies, because I'm telling you, I think there's something to do with advanced technology, another alien race or something like this. And of course, what really annoys me every single time is that we, the public who want the truth, the good paying, working, docile slave race, are wanting to understand the truth. And who the hell are these people who think that they're privy to all of this and no one else? So it's rather like, some of these researchers, they think we've got some type of, advanced human race, and then we're being left behind because a lot of the future race or the advanced race wants to move on and leave us lot behind.
As a medium, and this is addressed to anyone in the group who's psychic, and that's all of us.
And are you going to say that, Neil?
Yeah. Any thoughts? Does the spirit world, for instance, give any clues about what's going on? ET wise, aliens. We're trying to sort of reach out in the dark, but surely if they're in a position.
I don't know. This is Philip. I don't really know, because the thing is, though, I deal more with the consciousnesses of people that has crossed over, so I don't. The only thing I can tell you is that I've had these negative experiences. One of them was quite profound back in 1989 that changed my concept of reality as we know it. But no, I haven't had anything. I'm very wary of people who channel these entities and they bring all this stuff through, because I wouldn't have the first clue on how to channel anyway. The channel that I do is through mental means, just a process of discarnates, linking with us and bringing information through to pass on to a loved one. So I do believe there's a difference in energies with regards to those in the spirit world and those that that we would consider as alien. Ronnie's also pointed out quite a lot of the times that we have to open up our mindsets into the belief that we could be dealing with something that goes back into ancient times that we would consider demonic. As I said, we have to be open-minded to these parallels, because our concept of demons, as it were, is like so ingrained within like folklore. We just see like a devil running around with a pitchfork, and it's not like that at all. You have to go back into ancient times and further back into the creation of us as humans, to try and work out this good and evil. So I've had nothing psychically come through. I've seen them. Both Ron and I have seen and experienced UFO activity, seen some very strange things, that we want answers to. But no, nothing in the way of like what we're dealing with. That's why I believe it's on a completely different level of vibration from those who are on the good side. And these guys, well, I'm not saying they're all on the bad side, but a lot of what we're seeing and hearing, it doesn't seem to be quite good.
I get the impression that those that have departed, our loved ones, to the next level, are almost in, the lovely, whatever you want to call it, spirit world, utopia.
The real world, yeah.
Yeah. But like you said, they're just not on that level of, I suppose there's people that were interested in UFOs and God knows what else, that are on that side now. I presume they're kind of still trying to pursue things, but
Yeah. I think
yeah.
because we're in a material universe, and the thing is, there must, going back into ancient times and text, you'll find it's all to do with the soul, and I've addressed this point over in some of my talks that I've done with regards to this holding ground. The earth seems to be like a prison for souls, and I'm not saying that we're all bad, but something somewhere has gone wrong. The paradise that we once remembered has been turned into darkness. And I think that, there's been this struggle, probably with ETs or extraterrestrials and humans or spirit people, which we are embodiment of, that this is a holding ground to feed their negativity or their existence. We're not sure, but I have heard on several occasions that Earth is like a prison ground for souls, and that we're trapped. And so that's another area of quite great interest to look into. Yeah.
Yep, I've heard that too. Andy, have you heard this soul thing, being trapped here?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I started off getting into the whole psychic thing and the whole spiritual thing. Love and light, fluffy clouds. There's angels, there's God. You go to the other side, and everything's wonderful. And then suddenly, all this conspiracy stuff and all this kind of like other stuff came in, and I didn't want to believe it at first. But now I've got no other choice but to absolutely agree with Philip. I think that we are in a bit of a pickle, and I think there are light beings, whether you call them kind of like I don't know, angels or guides or whatever, who are trying to help assist mankind ascend from this and escape from this. And the dark side really hate this, and they're doing everything they can to clamp down on it. And the physical materialization or manifestation of this dark agenda is the New World Order and everything that goes with it. So hence we've got the major politicians, the elitists who are into their paedophilia, the satanic rituals, Bohemian Grove and all of that lot. These are the ones running the show, but I think there are some spanners in the works because without getting too political, I think Trump has buggered things up, if you pardon my language. But I think Trump, although he's not a saint, he's not an absolutely golden child, apart from his lovely toupee, but he is uncontrollable from the Illuminati. The Illuminati wanted Hillary in, and everything was geared up for Hillary, who is, to me, a snake. She would have taken us to World War III, I'm sure of it. But Trump comes along and basically screws that up. Another thing that screwed it up is the whole Brexit thing, because a lot of people think kind of like the EU, isn't it wonderful? Our foreign European friends, we can hold hands and sing Kumbaya. That's what they think the EU is, whereas I view the EU as the next Soviet Union. And Mikhail Gorbachev actually said the most puzzling thing to him was the fact that the Western European powers want to recreate the Soviet Union, and that's coming from a former Soviet leader, so I think he would know. So how this I feel kind of like comes into the New World Order, the plan seems to be there would be the European Union, the African Union, the North and South American Union, and the Pacific Asia Union. The next step after you've got all these different unions around the world is to bring them all together into one union, which would be the New World Order. And I think Brexit has really screwed that up, and I hope it goes ahead, because I love my European friends. I've got a lot of European friends, Italian friends, French friends, German friends, and funnily enough, they all have the same opinion, that they hate the European Union, but they love their European friends. So without getting too political, I think this is where this comes in with the whole dark light thing, because I think the dark forces are using things like the European Union and using things like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and all of these political groups to try and clamp down on this world in a kind of bureaucratic Orwellian nightmare, as per Jim Mars's Fourth Reich. But I think things are changing. People are beginning to wake up. The mainstream media, or the lamestream media, as I've heard it called, are beginning to lose a lot of numbers. They are really struggling. ITV is losing a lot of its numbers and announcing profit losses. A lot of the newspapers are kind of losing their numbers, losing their readerships. People are questioning the mainstream media, and I think that people are questioning a far bigger number than we're aware of. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree with you totally. I mean, the thing is, though, it's the media machine which is owned by these people in charge who are the masters, and they're just basically the puppets. I mean, I found myself on the rough end of television years ago with regards to UFOs, and one of them was just a complete circus, and I didn't know that we were being set up to make it look as much on TV. But I think, yeah, you're right, Andy, we've come a long way now. People are questioning. I haven't bought a newspaper for years. The only one I bought was about Princess Diana meeting someone seeing Princess Diana's ghost or something. And, you know, I don't watch news. I just flick through AOL and see if there's anything interesting. So I think a lot of the mainstream media is kind of like, you know, now there's new methods of controlling people's minds through social media, which is even more of a problem now, through Facebooking, Twitter, riling people up, getting people to turn against each other. I mean, it's the same story, but in a different way, you know. But I totally, absolutely agree with you, Andy. That is what it's all about. Light and darkness. There is still a war going on. It has not completed. It's not finished.
Yeah, this is Ronnie, Andy. For some reason, I have been absolutely against the European Union from day one. And I have noticed, and I think people have got wise, how nasty they have been. They have bitten, kicked and screamed. They have thrown every lie imaginable to try and dissuade us from actually leaving them. And I think it got so nasty. I was personally called a racist for actually opting out, because I know what they're doing. I've known this for a long time. You're right. There was a world federation, eventually one flag, and then that's when trouble really begins. Basically, a Luciferian future.
Yeah,
Sounds very dark.
It's really. What I found is it's really interesting. Awake, spiritual, very often mediumistic and psychic people all seem to quite like Trump and hate the European Union, whereas kind of people who are very mainstream, very programmed, very kind of like scientific, rational minded, they seem to go with what they're told because that's what they've been programmed. But when you actually get down to their arguments, they have no arguments really. I found that the last kind of recourse of what I call the libtard, the kind of the liberal retard, is name calling. As soon as they go into, oh, well, you're a racist, you're a xenophobe, you're a bigot, you're this, that, that's not an argument. That's never an argument. And then they just have to retreat behind that with their name calling. And what I think is that the change that has happened is that with all the liberal kind of name calling at people, they thought they'd won the day. They thought they'd won Hillary getting in, and they thought they'd win with Britain staying within the European Union with all their name calling. But what actually happened is sensible, normal people have thought, do you know what? I'm just going to sit back. I'm going to wait. And I'm going to wait for my vote. And they voted Trump, and they voted out. They voted leave. And that's a really positive sign to me that all this name calling and kind of liberal, kind of wishy-washy, mumbo-jumbo, politically correct nonsense is actually beginning to get hammered.
Interesting. Now, how does all that tie with UFOs then?
Well, okay, so the UFOs would be the dark forces, the dark aliens, essentially, who wish to take over this planet. They are doing it through their puppets, which is the New World Order. They are doing it through satanic rituals. This is trickling down into things like probably the Bilderberg Group, the G20. Because the thing is, as you guys would probably agree, the politicians that we see in the media, they're not really the dark forces. They're just the puppets. The dark forces are above them, what you might call the shadow government, and it's the shadow government who have these dark satanic links with the dark ETs.
I mean, it's proven, isn't it? I mean, it's absolutely proven. All these presidents and all these people go to Satan worship, and they're telling us to be good children, slap your hand if you're wrong. And they're the ones, you know, they're the very people, and it's been proven black and white. They are the ones who are into all this satanic ritual, which does summon up these darker energies from these other alternative dimensions, which are coming in and has been a force for a very long time.
I mean, Bohemian Grove. I mean, Bohemian Grove is for those who don't know it, people must know it by now, but for those who don't know it...
It was after Crossroads, wasn't it?
It's a place in California, deep in the woods, where loads of world leaders go along to worship a 40-foot owl with human screaming sounds in something called the Cremation of Care, whereby they all wear black hoods and chant around these fires, then come on TV and talk about good Christian values and good wholesome American values.
Oh God!
So yeah,
God help
okay.
us.
The aliens, ETs, are trying to take over from within our own political systems. This is the whole idea. Because I've heard they're not allowed to literally take over a planet. I don't know who creates the rules on taking over planets, but this is what I heard.
Well,
they're not allowed to take over a planet per se with ray guns or whatever. They have to kind of infiltrate it, a bit like the Borg, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, it's
That's
a
a good
battle. It's a
example.
battle. It's a battle. You've got two sides. You've got the sides that I think are linked to humans, who either created humans or kind of test tubed, kind of like crossbred hybrids, which are now the humans that we see today, versus the dark lot, who basically want as dumb, stupid sheep, as Philip rightly pointed out, feeding off negative energy, feeding off the wars, feeding off the paedophilia, feeding off the satanic rituals. We're in a war zone. We're literally in a spiritual war zone, and it's becoming more and more apparent now, is what I think.
And I think, yes, Andy, also the hybridization program is probably a way of them to try and infiltrate this plane physically by bringing their energies into a physical body, into this physical matrix. That is one possibility that we cannot discount. I mean, we may be wrong, but it's the only way for these higher dimensional entities or lower dimensional entities, whichever way you see them, in penetrating and getting through physically into our matrix. Because instead of using and controlling people's minds, they're actually up there programmed through this secret hybridization program to create these monsters to come into this world. I mean, it'll make a great novel, but you've got to look at that.
Yeah, also, this is Ronnie, also is interesting because, as you're saying, they can't come in with ray guns, basically putting it humorously, because they fear. Look what happened in the Second World War. Look what happened. We were so small, we were so tiny, and yet we defeated a powerful regime. Now, if we can topple Germany, we can do almost anything. If push comes to shove, I think that's why they can't anticipate it. They're a little bit worried. So they're using another means, as we've been discussing, another way of trying to infiltrate our psyche. It's very fascinating.
Battle of the Butter Mountains. But
well, it's like angels. I mean, the angels had swords. Now, in films they've got Darth Vader with a lightsaber.
That's right.
It's light. It's good and bad, and this theme has been right through our human physical inception. Is good and bad, right and wrong. So Andy's right. It's a war. It's an ancient war, and it's still going on today.
Ben,
what do you reckon,
you'd like to add something? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Andy in particular has said something interesting, and all of you guys have touched on it. And that's the 2016 effect, as I called it, which is Trump and Brexit, basically. Now, I quite agree. Trump and Brexit were not planned. They were not intended by the New World Order, and when they happened, it indicated a major snafu in the engine room, basically, and I think there's signs that the powers that be have regrouped and they're trying to contain the situation now and to manage Trump in office. I mean, the original plan, I think, was to probably eliminate him somehow, but I think they've decided to try and manage him where he is. And there are some worrying signs that he's been compromised. But it's interesting to actually get into conversations with people within the conspiracy community, because I don't know if any of you guys have had this, but they'll say, well, Ben, I can't believe you've fallen for this. Can't you see that Trump is one of them? And it's all planned? And I says, well, I ask them for reasons. Why do you think it's all planned? And they'll say why, and I'll counter those reasons with my own points. And I say, well, Ben, it only looks like that because they're so crafty that the conspiracy is so deep that we can't even see it anymore. And I always like to ask those people, well, under what circumstances can the New World Order ever be seen to end? And they're like, oh, I can't really. And you can't answer that. So there's an awful lot of kind of. I think there's some people who are excessively paranoid within our community, which is a shame. But I do think it is a good sign. I mean, I do feel encouraged. I mean, it's since 2016 there has been, I think, a regression. We know that several, like in France, the Macron getting in was a real. Was a real blow because
the French Tony Blair. I mean, let's face it, ex-Rothschild banker.
He's run as an independent, but he's simply a part of the governing party, which Hollande was a member of, and Sarkozy.
I
and
think
those people.
the EU were desperate to get him in, because if she got in, it would have absolutely caused utter mayhem, because she wanted out as well, didn't she, of the European Union?
Le Pen,
Yeah.
yes. Le Pen was Francis Trump. I mean, she was like a non-establishment candidate, and they were desperate to keep her out. The Brexit was, they threw everything at us to try and stop us voting to leave. Absolutely everything they could. And we still did it. I mean, so it was such hope in 2016, and I've not lost that hope. I think there still is hope, and it's just really, 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 really nice to know. But I mean, it is. I mean, at a very fundamental level, I think, globalist control actually broke down during 2016. It really did. On the power structures of the world, they hadn't had a call from head office for a long time, and they were running around in chaos, and all kinds of things happened. It was amazing. I just hope that happens again. It carries on.
I agree, Ben. And one of the things I would say as a counter to the people who have said, "Oh well, Trump is just part of the system," blah blah blah. I would say, look at the faces of the people behind him when he talked about draining the swamp when he was inaugurated. They were absolutely shitting themselves.
Back to
I know. I mean,
gas, I guess.
there's some people you'll never convince. There's some people in the conspiracy theory community you'll never convince. And we could be like 30 years into the post-Illuminati era, and these people will still be peeping around corners, going, "My goodness, aren't they crafty?"
I think
you'll
most
never,
of it,
you'll
yeah.
never convince all of them.
No, I think also if the public look and see the tragedies of the world that create so much negativity and pain, Princess Diana's passing, 9/11, it goes on, these wars of destruction. And during those the two times, 9/11 and Princess Diana, the complete total change on this planet of mourning and grief was so incredible. And I believe that these elite members of the extraterrestrial connections in human form probably feed off that negativity, and I'm absolutely convinced there's a great deal of Masonic nature behind these rituals that occur to bring things down, to bring everyone down to a lower level. So you can see that we're trying to lift it, and they keep pushing it down. We're lifting it up, and hopefully, within our lifetime, maybe afterwards, they may have lifted this veil of darkness from this world.
Is this why there's lots of sort of professional skeptics on TV and radio who will try and poo-poo psychics and say it's all cold reading?
You just have to look at the UFOs. They're still telling us today that they're a load of rubbish. They get mixed viewpoints on AOL. 1 minute it says to you there's life after death. The next minute you've got something on there telling you that it's just some natural process that's going through the brain as it's dying. So they're mixing this up. What they're doing is they're telling you one thing, it's like the Roswell autopsy again. They lift it up, then they drop it. So I know how they work. I mean, the game's up where we're concerned as researchers are concerned with regards to this. But a lot of people, bless them, they don't understand that, and that's why their psyche's so muddled and confused.
Well, Philip, you mentioned being on TV. You mentioned a TV show that you were on. I mean, I follow the UFO issue as it's covered by the mainstream media, and I must say the quality of the coverage of the UFO paranormal conspiratorial field has plummeted. It's really stooped to a total nadir. I've been asked to take part in several programs myself, the ones that you were in, similar to the ones that you were in, and I've said no, or words to that effect. And when I see the actual programs, I'm very relieved that I said no. And there's a limit on how bad a TV show can be by accident. This is definitely as Admiral Hillencutter, the head of the CIA in 1947, actually said, we're soberly concerned about the UFO phenomenon. It's a very real thing. But through official ridicule and denial, we will make the general public, think that it's nonsense. And we're seeing that policy enacted on our TV screens to this day.
Yes, so nothing's changed. They will not back down. They're going to keep doing it and keep doing it. So, it's up to the researchers to try and push this and make people change, not just, to convince them of this reality, but to convince them that there is life after death, that we're eternal, that this is just a part of a very small journey to a bigger picture.
Now, we've lost one of those voices that was trying to remind us of those kind of facts, actually, which we mentioned earlier was Jim Marrs, the American author. He started out as a journalist who died, I believe, on August the 2nd of a heart attack. He was ill prior to that. He had to cancel a few appearances, I believe, at various conferences.
I think he had liver failure as well.
Yeah, he was quite a poorly man towards the end, unfortunately. Now Ben, you read a Jim Miles book or two?
I read a book a long time ago called Ruled by Secrecy, which is one of his classic books. He's also written several other books. One's called Crossfire, the plot that killed Kennedy, which is about the JFK assassination, which inspired Oliver Stone to make the film JFK. Jim Mars also, he has dealt with the UFO subject. In fact, he carried out an investigation in 1975 into the Aurora incident, which is an event which is very similar to Roswell, but it happened much earlier. In fact, it happened in 1898 in a place called Aurora, Texas. Now, this is not far from where he lives in Fort Worth, Texas. The thing about based on the work of Jim Mars, I would say that he's found considerable evidence to suggest that this was the earliest recorded case of a crash retrieval of a UFO. And if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't know about it. So he's done some. That's one of the brilliant things he's got into, and he was such a character. He had like this big white beard and his cowboy hat, and he used to talk like that. He had a real Texan accent. He used classic lines about UFOs and about what happened, things like that. It's really, really sad we've lost him. Very sad indeed.
Yeah, I always kind of every time I'm on Amazon, I would look at UFO books, and his books would always come up in the list as recommended reads. And they all look kind of really thinking, hey, I really should be reading this one, or that one looks good as well. And so I never actually got around to buying them, but there's almost like I must get around to buying something of Jim Mars, but I just never did, and I think I'll have to now that he's passed on. But I did see him on some presentations and things like that, and I always remember one of the things he said about aliens coming to here when we started reaching the atomic age in particular was the fact that he said we probably woke them up a little bit more with our nuclear explosions and testings and things like that. And he put it in a strange, a very interesting way, whereas, oh my God, the kids have found the matches, which was, I thought was quite a humorous way of us coming into the atomic age from the point of view of the aliens. Did you read any Jim Mars books, Philip?
Yes, I've actually got one upstairs that I got from Amazon about 9/11. He wrote a book all about 9/11 as well, and I think he wrote one called Dark White. I think it was called Dark White. Was it called Dark White or something like that? Maybe I'm thinking of another author, but I have read his books, and one of the things I found, he was very humorous in his books. He kind of like turned it kind of like a little bit humorously, but he was a brilliant researcher, and absolutely missed by a lot of people now, because we just hope that he's found his what he's been looking for now that he's crossed over. But and I did see that documentary he did about the very first, what they believed to be an alien, that because the grave was dug up, the body was removed, apparently, wasn't it, in that documentary? Ben, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
It was.
It was taken from the grave.
They called him a spaceman or something, or a space visitor or something. And didn't the UFO strike the church or something? Because it came in.
It struck the water tower. I think it was a water tower it hit.
Yeah.
And then it crashed. And then, of course, it needed help and then died. And I think that most of the local community, which was very small then, knew about this. And then, of course, even in those days, it was all covered up. And then, of course, when they went to the grave, the markings of the grave had been removed, and the body itself taken away. But you're right. If it wasn't for him, but his work was brilliant. He was a genius in the way he wrote these massive books, and he really did his research. I mean, where he found the time for it, I have no idea.
It must have been all his journalistic skills, because he did start out as a journalist, I believe.
Yeah. He like the grave. It's an interesting thing about the grave marker being taken away. It was a direct response to his work, because what happened was, when the research project was underway, people would come and were visiting this tiny little village, and the local people got really fed up with it. It's possibly the cemetery committee actually decided to remove the marker, but then there's signs that the grave has been disturbed. So there was a body under there since 1898. That was possibly an alien creature that had been lying there, but it was pulled out. Someone basically came and exhumed it to get it out of the way before the researchers found it.
Wow. Now, they could have merged that into a story with Little House on the Prairie, couldn't they? because it was around that time it took place. That'd be great. Laura Ingalls Wilder meets the Greys or something.
Is that you, John Wayne?
Yeah, we know it's getting late, so this is where my humour's going. So
Yeah. I mean, Jim Mars also, what I liked about Jim Mars is that the way he put across his information was really kind of humorous. He's very funny with it. I mean, I listened to him a lot on the Alex Jones show, but he did a number of different interviews, and he's just kind of very laid back and very fun. He's quite of subversive. He had a kind of like almost subversive young person's sense of humour in an older man's kind of body, is what I felt.
And do we know where he was going? What his latest stuff was? Any idea of what he was working on before he passed?
Not sure.
I'm not sure, actually. Don't know.
And it's possible that someone might pick up the gauntlet and maybe publish his last books. It might take a few years to kind of get that together.
I bet there's going to be a conspiracy. There's going to be kind of Jim Mars was bumped off because he was about to announce dun dun dun.
Yeah, something like
I'm
that.
just waiting for. There's going to be. I'm sure that's going to come out.
Now, an interesting thing, if we just get slightly back to the earlier topic, we were talking about UFOs and human mutilations and things like that. Again, I saw this on a Rich Planet episode, and it also had a little bit to do with Andrew Johnson, who pointed out this particular book to do with stone circles and things like that. And some UFOs have been spotted near stone circles or old, tombs and things, Neolithic tombs. It's to do with, and I can't remember the exact thing, but it's to do with the electric-magnetic energy of the Earth, being the fact that at dusk and dawn, there's a changed energy in these things. And the theory is that they built these tombs and these burial grounds and places like that because they felt that they could get more energy out of the stone circles in some way, and they used like their natural psychics to locate where these places were. And what they were saying on the Rich Planet episode that I saw, the most recent one that is that they suspect that UFOs could be tapping into this same kind of dusk or twilight energy of the electromagnetic atmosphere of the Earth at that time. Why, we don't know. But it was just an interesting point that I thought that I'd like to raise before we close the show. I wonder if anyone's got any thoughts on that, because we talked about UFOs traversing through the the radiation belts, possibly going through the south and north poles, and this kind of like almost I thought tied in a little bit with that kind of thing of the electromagnetic energy of the Earth. Any thoughts on that kind of thing?
Yeah, because there was a guy from New Zealand called Bruce Cathy who wrote several books about this. And he was a pilot, and he observed UFOs while he was flying. And he gathered reports, and he worked out they were following certain paths. And he theorized that there were these lines of energy, which are similar to ley lines, that these UFOs were following. It's really quite amazing.
Right. And you've worked with ley lines, haven't you, Philip?
Yes, I have, and they do seem. I mean, a lot of the churches around the world are supposed to be linked with regards to these ley lines, sacred paths, and UFOs are normally attracted to this energy. It's interesting as well too that the aliens themselves, we call aliens, are very interested in not just us as living beings, but dead beings also. And as I go back again, it's all to do. I'm sure it's to do with the soul, and but most definitely with regards to energy or energy vortices, as they call them, these objects are seen around these ancient sites because they must hold some type of different energy, or like they're antennae for energy. And of course, we are just, beginning to. We don't even understand about Stonehenge, what it was used for. We can theorize, just as much as like the pyramids of Giza. They know that's a star map. But most historians will not give our past, the ancient people, the credit they deserve, because they were phenomenal in not only their building techniques, but also their astronomical details for astronomy. So, I do believe that these objects or energies come in on higher energies within the world. I said to Andy earlier, it's possible that most people who are open are resonating on different frequencies, light that these beings or these entities can see, and they're drawn to them. Whereas other people probably are operating on lower frequencies that will never see UFOs because their minds are too narrow, their field of consciousness is too low for these other entities to penetrate. That is a possibility. So it's all energy.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it is absolutely the UFO side of things is similar to the ghost and spook side of things in
definitely.
terms of some people can see them and pick up on them, and some people can't. And I think there are levels, and I'm not even sure the spirit world is even aware of the alien world, and possibly vice versa.
That's correct.
And we don't even know if these UFOs are from other planets. There's no proof that they're actually from other planets. Could they be
dimensional?
Through dimensions? Are they coming from different parts of the Earth? Who knows?
Yeah, I have a strong suspicion that we've probably got quite a few subterranean inhabitants we haven't quite discovered yet, and they're our neighbours, and they're just popping out now and again for doing the odd bit of shopping, which happens to be us, unfortunately.
What was quite disturbing, wasn't there an astronaut recently that went to the Antarctica, whatever they found there, and came back and said, it's evil, whatever it is, it's evil.
Oh, that was Buzz Aldrin, I think.
Yeah,
he was sick, wasn't he? He had to be medically evacuated. But it could be they're coming from under the sea. I mean, there's so much. A friend of Jim Mars was, of course, Bill Cooper, who wrote the book "Behold a Pale Horse."
Oh,
he
that's the man.
He once actually saw a huge, giant UFO coming out from under the sea. It's possible. I mean, we know less about the deep sea than we do about some of the outer planets of the solar system, and it wouldn't be surprising if there's things down there we don't know about. And God knows what they could be.
Well, wasn't it? Was it Bill Cooper who had the shootout with the sheriffs?
In
2000.
It's just after 9/11. This was. He was supposedly armed, but the gun was sort of like propped up against the porch, and he was over by his car, and he was killed in very, very mysterious circumstances. He was murdered, as far as I'm concerned.
Eric Clapton wrote a song about it. Is that right? No.
I don't know.
No, I Shot the Sheriff. No, all right. Otherwise. Sorry. Anyway, we're having to draw to a close now because we're near the end of the show. So we'd just like to ask our guests what plans they've got for the future, what books, projects, anything like that they might have in the pipeline. So, Ben, you've written Roswell Rising. You've got another one on the drawing board?
I am, in the moment, writing, whenever I can find time, the sequel to Roswell Rising, which is going to be called Roswell Revealed, A World After Disclosure. The first book's called Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure. So that's going to come out basically when it's finished and when it's ready. I haven't set a date on it, and I haven't got a deadline.
Let us know when that's done.
We'll do.
Talk to you about that. Philip, you've written a book, and I believe it's at the publishers now. You, the Public Deceived. Is that correct?
The Grand UFO Deception. Yes, I'm still waiting to hear from that one, but I have almost finished another one that I'm going to... I know that, we're contracted through publishers, but I thought I'm going to go through Amazon with this new one called A Passage Through Eternity, which talks more about life after death and the UFO phenomena, kind of like a mixture of the both and the experiences and theories behind that. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. So that should hopefully be finished quite soon.
Great. And Ronnie, you've got a book out soon, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been working on a novel. It's fiction, or is it? I've called it The Archons, and it's taken me 2 years and 3 months. It's to do with the government, it's to do with a rogue government, and it's to do with a journalist. I won't say any more than that, but I'm planning, hopefully, to have that out by Christmas. I can't be certain it will be out, but it's top secret. I've kept it as close to my heart as I can, and the reason why it's taken so long to write is because I want it absolutely perfect, especially some of the research. So it's called The Archons, and do look out for that.
We will. Okay. And Ben writes a blog, Hipanwo blog, Hospital Portals Against the New World Order, so they can find Ben on that website. Philip, you've just had your website revamped, is that correct?
Yes, we've just had I've had the website revamped, which is a much nicer, softer tone to it as well, and a little bit. We had to do a few corrections on it, and so I'm really happy about that. So it's we're all busy. We've got things to do. You have to live as well.
Of course.
In this life, we have to live as well. So trying to find time to get these things done sometimes can, like all of us, be a bit of a nightmare.
But that's at what's the website address for your website, Philip?
Oh, it's www.philipkinsella.com. So you can find it just by putting in Philip Kinsella. Has Andy got any books going? Are you doing anything, Andy? You can write something?
No, I haven't got time for books. I'm organising events though, so I can plug Tuned In Events.
Tuned In Events, go for it.
tuned with a D on the end, TUNED, in events. Find that on Facebook. I'm actually revamping my website as well, so the website's a bit out of date, but I'm going to make that more kind of fluid for mobiles and things like that. So I'm in the process of doing that. But the latest updates will be on the Facebook group. So anyone listening to this, especially in the southeast part of the UK, can go on to Tuned In Events on Facebook, have a look, and we're doing a lot of psychic events and things like that. And Philip and Ronald, maybe we could organise something in the future, maybe a little demo or something somewhere.
Cool. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. I'll tell you what would be good, actually. What most kind of psychic demos and clairvoyant demos don't have is a mixture of the UFO side of things and the demo side of things. So maybe mix a demo with a talk.
Well, I promise you I won't come dressed up as a grey alien doing
I was going to say, I'll organise the fancy dress.
Nice reps here now.
Yeah. Okay, right. I think our show is now drawing to a close, but I'd like to say thank you very much to our guests for taking part. That's Ben Emlyn Jones, Ronnie Kinsella, Philip Kinsella, and myself, Neil Geddes Ward, along with Andrew Chaplin. You've been listening to the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and you can listen again to us on Podbean, Stitcher, and iTunes. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. Good night, all.
See you later.
Bye-bye.